Welcome back to the 1% Insight. This week, I'm delighted to be joined by Joel Harrison. Joel has spent over 20 years at the center of B2B marketing as an editor, keynote speaker, ambassador, and evangelist, being instrumental in defining the vibrant and dynamic sector that we know today. Joel has co-founded the B2B Marketing magazine in 2004, going on to set up the B2B Marketing Awards, B2B Ignite, the Global ABM Conference, and latterly the Propolis community. Joel is also the host of the Trust and Influence in B2B podcast, key topics we are going to be focusing on today. Welcome to the 1% Insight, Joel.
Thanks, Jack. It's lovely to be here.
Brilliant. So I'd love to jump straight in, Joel, and kind of get an idea of how you got into B2B marketing, all the way kind of setting up the magazine back in 2004.
Well, I could tell you a very, very long version of that story, but I don't think anyone would have the patience or the interest in that. So I'll try and tell you like a brief version of it. I was a journalist working in marketing. I had a friend who was a marketer, and we were talking about working for ourselves. And we noticed what could we do, and we looked around opportunities, and we noticed that there were in the UK at the time. This is like around the millennium. There were loads of marketing magazines. There were about 20, but there were nothing focused on B2B. And if you read those magazines, things like Marketing Week or Campaign, you might be familiar with, B2B just didn't exist in those areas. And it's like, just seemed really strange to me. And given a lot of my background had been in marketing about technology in the financial services sector, I was kind of, why isn't he focusing on this? And so the more we thought about it, the more we realized it was ridiculous and that it was an opportunity and we should go and do it. And again, a very long story short, we launched the magazine. And it seems crazy to build a business around a magazine, but that's what the media world was like around the turn of the millennium. And we launched it in 2004. And there wasn't really anything. There wasn't a B2B marketing sector there. There wasn't agencies like you guys, Jack. There were lots of big agencies and lots of people specializing in certain channels like direct marketing. This is before the internet really became a thing as well. Really, before LinkedIn was like an address book at that time. That was all it was. It was pre-Facebook and all those kind of things. So it was a very different era, a very different age. We launched the magazine, and gradually we've seen the industry. Certainly, it was more established in the US, in the UK, and Ireland. I suppose to a degree, I'm not less familiar with the trajectory within Ireland, but I see the tech sector being so big in Ireland. Gradually, kind of developed and evolved, and we got into events quite quickly. And we actually, the magazine actually stopped being printed in about 3 years ago. I've got some back issues on the wall behind me if you're able to see an image of this. But we still the business that exists to do some great events. We have a community for B2B marketers to come together called Propolis, as you say, which is where they can learn from each other. And my job, I've been released from being operationally involved in the business, and I'm now been free to be a speaker, a commentator, a podcaster, an influencer, and trying to kind of like really, a bit like you, Jack, trying to embody some of the changes that are going on in this world and learning new skills. And when you're at my advancing age, that's harder to do than when you're young like you and you're embracing all the things that are going on.
It's a fantastic journey to date. And how did you kind of land on the areas? Was trust and influence like core pillars back in 2004 when you kind of started off the magazine, or is that something you kind of noticed throughout the industry and analyzing it over the last 2 decades?
Yeah, it's a really good question. It wasn't something that we talked a lot about in 2004. It was anything that really came into focus for me the last year or so. And when I got the opportunity to step back from operations at B2B, because I was the head of content, I was responsible for all the products, and I was very much a kind of customer focused person as well. So I had a very, very busy role. I was thinking, what could I do? And I thought I was going to write a book. I thought, that's what people often do, is they go and write a book because it's a great way to immerse yourself in a topic. And I looked around and I was going to write one on thought leadership because that's a very interesting topic, and it's quite not really very well served in the whole world of marketing. People talk about content marketing a lot, and they talk about digital channels and social. They don't talk about thought leadership as much. And then so that sounded like a good idea. And then I thought, well, actually, the thought leadership is the kind of is the how, but the thrust is the why. And then that seemed like a much more compelling subject to me. And then it kind of started to spread out into other areas as well. So it's been fascinating to see this world I've kind of known for so well for over 2 decades, but to see it through a new lens, and that lens being trust. And I really think it's never been more. It's always been important, but it's particularly important now.
100% agree, Joel. Like we see it ourselves as well. It seems like there's an acceleration of that, where there's an acceptance almost that B2B, the marketing is not a cost center. It's an investment, and that if you're not doing it, you're actually not winning future customers, and potential pipeline, etc., will dry up, because as we know from numerous studies, most of your target audience aren't actually in market right now. And it's the work you're doing to build that trust with them to make sure that you're, top or at least one or two on that shortlist when they create it, it's more important than ever as technology advances, AI advances. People are replicating products in hours, not weeks or months. Development is going crazy fast right now and very competitive. So that trust and brand you build amongst your prospects is hugely important. And were there any mentors, core people that kind of helped you along your journey in the early days of setting up the magazine, in terms of going from the kind of the journalist side to becoming more of an entrepreneur, business owner? Were there any kind of key people in the B2B marketing community that you found really helped you take those next steps to have the success you did?
That's a really good question. I think we had various kind of chair people of our business over the years, but I think the one person probably over the course of that time who's been really helpful, and someone you might want to consider Jack for an interview, Shane Redding, who kind of set up the B2B marketing course at the Institute of Direct Marketing in the UK. And she's a very passionate advocate in all things B2B. Someone who's got a lot of interesting opinions, and she's a fascinating person to talk to. So she's been brilliant. And other people as well who have kind of helped in terms of, another person who stands out for me in terms of their kind of knowledge and how they've really pushed the boundaries is someone called Paul Cash, who runs an agency called Rooster Punk, and he's a fascinating guy, and he's really helped to kind of his narrative is around humanization and B2B, and that's a really important topic as well. And that's, I think, one of the things what you've seen. Back to your earlier question, really, what are the kind of challenge of trust look like, perhaps in the kind of the early noughties? There was still this kind of lingering belief that B2B marketing was a rational activity, purchasing was a rational activity, and we did it. And I think hopefully most people have understood now that it is really not very rational at all. It's very emotional. They might post-rationalize and put a load of reasons why they made a decision afterwards, but often it's based on some very, very irrational reasons. And trust isn't always rational, but it's very, very important. So Paul, in terms of the humanization piece, was one of the people to bang that drum and to really understand that mindset. So lots of people on the way along, a lot of help. It's been a long journey, and I've just loved talking to people. The thing that's so great about the B2B marketing industry is everyone is so passionate about it, and everyone also understands that we're all inherently kind of geeks, right? We're always, you were talking beforehand that you started marketing and you were talking about sportswear brands and I don't know, soft drink brands, and I think anyone who's B2B knows that's not really very interesting, and it's a bit facile, and there's only what's that quote that supposedly Steve Jobs said to one of the key approaches as CEOs? Do you want to be selling sugared water for the whole of your life? It's a bit like that, right? It's kind of, there's so much complexity and so much interest in that complexity.
With B2B marketing, we all like to have this perfect, ideal that we think that everyone goes through the same process and makes the same actions, and it's a funnel approach, and that it's not we're not humans, they're just robots on the other end of it making buying decisions, when in reality it's just a group of people making buying decisions. They have their own personal interests for their own career, no matter what company they're at, and that's inherently going to be a big factor in how they make decisions. It's like, what's in it for me? They're looking at it from the company point of view, their own personal ambitions in terms of maybe getting hired, getting a bonus, etc. They want to make the right decisions, and sometimes I think there's more of a acceptance of it now that like the customer, the buying journey is not rational at all. It's not a set instruction. It's like people go in a market, out of market. They might see you on social. They won't talk to you again for ages. They might join a webinar. They might go ghost again. And then all of a sudden you get a demo request or something like that. And it's very hard to attribute that. And I think that scares a lot of leadership teams, I guess, in B2B companies, because obviously what can't be tracked is scary. And, but I think there's more of an acceptance now. What's your take on that one?
Absolutely, and we're still in this world where MQL seems to have it'd still be a currency that's viable, but I think most marketers know that its relevance is limited at best. So yeah, it's a very challenging, interesting world.
It is, definitely. I guess we're in 2026 now, first Monday, official Monday back in 2026. So we're going straight into it. In 2026 and beyond, in your own kind of analysis of the market, Joel, and your experience, what are the biggest challenges that B2B companies are facing when they're trying to build this trust and credibility with their potential buyers?
Well, I think one of the biggest challenges to me, the reason I think we've kind of tipped around the edges of this in our conversation so far, what's changed now to make trust so relevant right now is, first of all, there's a few things. First of all, there's a kind of general sense of cynicism that's grown up across society. And I'm not going to get too political, but there's certain populist politicians who've kind of helped to encourage that by kind of deriding experts and expertise. So that's a kind of a baseline layer. You also have kind of traditional sources of trust have been removed. And, Jack, I come from a different age to you. I grew up in the era of magazines where there was authoritative sources that you knew they were authoritative because they landed on your desk in print and paper form, but even subsequent to them, those brands were very powerful on the internet, kind of media intermediaries, but those guys have increasingly become diminished in terms of their authority and then the kind of space they take up in the market. There's much more noise in the market now. And then a link to that as well, then obviously in the last 3 years we've had, or is it 3 years? I can't remember when ChatGPT launched. It's kind of scarily a long time ago now, isn't it? Everyone has this ability to generate ability to create AI slop is the kind of term which seems to be used for it. Very easy to create compelling looking content from the outside, which actually isn't really based on anything and isn't really grounded and isn't really authoritative and very robust. So there's more noise. It's harder it's more messages we're all consuming. So it's harder to make your message stick. So that's where building relationships is really, really important, and investing in trust and mechanisms to really reinforce the value and the importance and the resonance of your messaging and your whole authority around your brand.
Have you seen any, I guess, tactics or strategies work well in kind of recent years in this kind of changing landscape?
Well, I think that for me, there are three pillars to trust, really, three primary things that you can do to really build trust. I mean, that's besides understanding what your brand is and committing to that and building it, right? That's a kind of fundamental, and the association to that. But very closely aligned to that, there's the three areas. As I say, thought leadership is the first one. I'm a really big believer in thought leadership. Having something that you believe in, that you stand for, and that you are, and clearly expressing the benefits of what you do as an organization and the challenges which you help people address. So it's not so much about purpose, well, it can overlay with purpose. It's about how your organization can help address the problems and perhaps identify problems which they didn't understand or appreciate yet. So you're helping to build that sense of relationship and that sense of trust with an organization via, higher level content. So it's distinguished from, it's not just content marketing, because people often confuse content marketing with thought leadership. Of course, they're both content, but one is content marketing for me is more kind of transactional. It's more around that kind of demand generation process, that flow. It's more about kind of orientated towards leads and practical solutions. This is much more strategic and high level than that. So thought leadership is the first one. As I said earlier on, I think hasn't been given the kudos or the respect or the understanding it deserves historically. There's all kinds of reasons why, and I can kind of go into that in detail, but that's quite a long conversation. But the second area is influencer marketing, which I think is something which has, again, a lot of people have assumed has been a consumer discipline, a consumer thing, because of what we know and we see in our consumer world. We see influencers who are promoting consumer brands and are, on social media, on TikTok and channels like that, and being kind of very overt in their kind of promotion of that. Whereas influencers in B2B, and there was a great study, it was a piece by Ogilvy about 3 years ago, which really penny drop for me, that influencer marketing is a much broader sphere than that. It's not just those paid individuals who play an important role within influencer marketing, but they're not the only voices that are able to drive influence. There's a big overlap between thought leadership and influencer marketing, but also the other aspect you have of influence marketing is internal influencers or people within your company who are influencers. So, and there are third parties who are influential, but they won't be paid. And journalists are a great example who fits that character, or commentators in the market more generally. So understanding influencers is a really, really powerful way of driving trust. And it's that third party aspect to that, albeit via voices that aren't overtly expressly paid by you and your organization, but also have different distribution channels, able to amplify and reinterpret in a way that seems relevant to them and is authentic to them. And the third area, I'd say, and these three really do overlap, is advocacy. And we all know, without having to be told, no one was surprised if you say that your customers are your best advocates, they're your best route to market. But advocacy is such a poorly understood and poorly utilized aspect of B2B marketing. So few marketing programs really seek to kind of, weaponize is the wrong word, but operationalize that advocacy base of existing customers beyond perhaps some very kind of standard things like case studies. And we're starting to see that recognized in B2B marketing. We're starting to see kind of what I'm kind of calling like a trust net area evolving of providers and solutions that are specifically focused on kind of formalizing and deploying all those great vibes you have from your customers to actually help your marketing work better. So for me, it's thought leadership, influencer marketing, and advocacy. They're very closely related, particularly, if LinkedIn will call thought leader ads. They're basically influencer marketing ads, but they'll call them thought leader ads. And advocacy can be your team as well. But those are the three things for me, which are the most powerful means of really helping to ramp up your trust, particularly in this current world.
Back to a previous point, I think you made on the thought leadership. Why do you think historically that this hasn't been an area that, brands have wanted to invest in, or they don't see the real value? They think it is as a cost, where that's building the trust, building a thought leadership function, the advocacy, the influencer marketing, all those areas working together. Why has that kind of been neglected? And B2B marketing teams have had to fight so hard to kind of maybe fight that battle to say it is worth it, and then maybe not being given that support from leadership.
It's a really good question. I think there are a lot of reasons for it. One of them is that thought leadership was disconnected from the commercial aspect of marketing. It was seen as a kind of a top of funnel. I know we're kind of questioning the notion of the funnel is a dubious one at best, but at least we understand where it is in the process. It's a top of funnel activity which organizations have struggled to connect meaningfully to revenue orientated metrics. Right. So and this is the bit that many people who are detractors of B2B don't really understand. You have people who are in your organization, B2B organizations, that need to be able to see what their marketing is delivered, right? And brand awareness just isn't something which connects to revenue in a way that's meaningful for those people. So that's why thought leadership, one of the reasons why thought leadership has been disconnected from it. Another one is it's very complicated and expensive because there's one of the reasons why it's different from content marketing is because it has to be based on data, whether that's research, primary research, or whether it's kind of customer data. It has to be some rigorous basis rather than just being just some nice content you created. And that's expensive and time consuming, and we know that B2B marketing often works on short time frames. Third reason, which I'd point to right now, because there are others, is the fact that often B2B marketing campaigns are run by integrated agencies, right? Now, you're a content agency, what you guys do, and I don't know, I suspect you have a pretty good take on what thought leadership is. But if you're a B2B marketing agency and you're delivering advertising or program, whatever level you're doing it, that's your primary orientation. You're not really, thought leadership isn't something which you understand or can sell. You basically sell what you do, right? And they don't, and typically those agencies, who are great companies, they do a great job, and they can derive excellent results, will sell what they do because they're businesses as well. So, and they don't understand thought leadership. It's complicated, it takes time, it doesn't align with what they do, it doesn't demonstrate results. They're not going to push that. They're going to push the things they do understand. So there are lots and lots of reasons.
For, I guess, sitting in the shoes of maybe a marketing team within a B2B company right now, many have set the strategy or are still kind of working the last few bits going into 2026. This week, next week, by the time this is released, they'll probably be a couple of weeks into their strategy. And they may or may not have, I guess, got that buy-in to say, test that out a bit more to thought leadership or your content marketing and kind of develop something like a brand, focus on the trust. They mightn't have got the budget just now for it. How would you advise them to kind of showcase the real value, or I guess the consequences maybe of not investing it, that they can maybe speak to their leadership team, the CFO of their B2B company, and say, listen, we need to actually invest in this, and this is why we should do it. What type of conversation, or how would you kind of take that conversation if you were in a B2B marketing team at that company?
One of the biggest challenges for marketing leaders in B2B is knowing how and what to say to the CEO and the CFO, because they don't speak marketing. They think they understand marketing and it's simple, but they don't really speak marketing. So marketers have got to know. I don't want to make it sound patronizing, because I really don't mean it, because I know it's incredibly hard. They've got to know how to communicate with them in a way that's meaningful to them. And saying we're going to do thought leadership because it's going to communicate build a better relationship with our customers and position ourselves around a great topic. They're going to go, okay, great. So what? I guess the thing for me is you've got to strategic thought leadership. I've done a lot of work around this based on the entries to the B2B Marketing Awards. Is when you have thought leadership that is joined up all the way through the funnel. It's not just a top of funnel brand oriented exercise. That way lies madness, essentially. Like, but great B2B marketing has to be integrated and has to demonstrate success through the funnel. So it's got to be able to demonstrate, if not MQLs, then it's got to demonstrate ability to drive engagement with your organization. It's got to be able to position you and provide meaningful marketing traction, which the sales team recognizes, embraces, and wants to utilize actively. And it's actually then got to be deployable within the sales conversation as well. So it's got to be able to have an impact on the middle of the funnel and the bottom of the funnel. And those look like different things in different ways. So for me, that means that you can't be spreading your marketing dollar or euro or pound thinly. You've got to focus it around larger themes where you have a thought leadership messaging at the top, which can then be deployed in a more demand generation capacity further down, and then again in a kind of interactive, dynamic capacity for the sales team. So now, would you necessarily say that in as many words to CEO or CFO? I'm not sure that you would. Ideally, you should have such a good relationship with them. They would kind of understand that. It's you need to tell them what it is. Need to agree what the terms of engagement are with them. For me, it's a better way of getting, if you do it right, and doing it right is complex. I'm not going to pretend that it's not. It's a better way of getting better marketing bang for your buck and creating something which has a resonance over a longer period of time and repeatable over multiple years. There's also the other question which you asked, Jack, is if you're not going to do this, how are you going to distinguish yourself in this increasingly competitive, samey market where everyone's pumping out the same stuff all the time? So you've got to do something different to distinguish yourself, and that could be you do amazingly creative advertising, but that might not be that. Maybe even more uncomfortable for those people because that costs a lot of money and it requires you to say some quite controversial things to be different genuinely. I think it's about framing thought leadership within a package of a more commercially orientated program that's long-term and repeatable, and also understanding that and communicating that to the board, not talking about bullshit necessarily in its own right because they won't understand it. And then it's also about saying, well, if we're not going to distinguish ourselves, then how are we going to be successful in this world? So it's an opportunity and a threat at the same time.
Over the last kind of 6 months or so, we've had a lot of interesting conversations with people saying that the benefit of events actually on their marketing. And I know events has been, well before my time of entering the B2B market, but it's been a core part of the marketing strategy in terms of lead generation, but actually having that conversation with customers as well. And I saw firsthand in 2025 the real benefits of going to both niche events and then the larger, obviously, events that everyone goes to. So there's kind of a mix in that. And I know that that's something you focus on as well, from actually speaking and being a keynote at those, but also the work that you were doing at B2B Marketing and the Propolis community and setting up all those events and the awards as well. How have you found events as a channel, I guess, of building that thought leadership, that advocacy, and building that trust amongst maybe potential clients, members, or maybe you've heard stories from companies and seen that work well? How have events kind of shaped that trust factor?
Well, I think you really goes a really good point, Jack, because I've never seen events have always been important in B2B marketing. And then we had COVID and it all changed. It became digital events. And then we got kind of sick of digital events because, they're very convenient, but their perceived value is quite low. And rightly or wrongly, because sometimes the value was very, very high, right? But I think they just became a bit ubiquitous. I've never known a period in B2B marketing where events have been as powerful and important as they are right now, both within the different vertical sectors, but also within B2B marketing as an industry itself. And there's loads of events going on, and that's great because it's a great way to meet people and to be inspired and to connect with your peers and with the people who you might be buying from or seeking to sell to. I mean, so there's two reflections on that. One is just in terms of Propolis, which is our community, the community, it's a peer-to-peer advisory really platform that B2B Marketing launched, where we have brands like HPE and Deloitte and ServiceNow and IBM are part of that organization. So more the corporate end and the kind of SaaS end. But what we tend to do with where events work within Propolis is that we run regular events activities to bring marketers together, very much in a kind of a safe space where they can talk to each other and explore the challenges they have. And we have experts and case studies within the room in a live environment, and they can run through what different people have done. And so it's very much a kind of intimate atmosphere where you're not worried about revealing your challenges and perhaps your unknowns as well. So that's extremely powerful in that regard. But I know in a more kind of, we also run conferences, say like the Global ABM Conference, which took place in November, and that's just brilliant because in terms of a sales cycle, and this works across all kinds of events, all kinds of disciplines and verticals. We live in this world. We talked earlier on about the fact that MQLs still exist, but are kind of challenging as a currency. And we know that a lot of research goes on in dark mode, right? When people aren't they don't want to give you their details to download content anymore. They don't want to become part of a lead funnel. They want to consume at their own time, and they want to pop up exactly as you said earlier on when it suits them to say, I want to buy this. So what an event does, if you can convince someone to come to an event, you're kind of like you're making them raise their hand and become a prospect, and you're bringing them there to the organization. If they've attended, it doesn't matter how much, to a certain extent, it doesn't matter how much they pay for it. And often if you're a prospect, it'll be free. It's about their time, their commitment, about to being there. And nothing says I'm interested more than I'm going to give up a day or more of my time to turn up and be there in person with you and your people and your peers. And and also, as I said before, again, they may not appreciate this, but the thing which is really so valuable is like presentations, fantastic, it's great. I'm here with other people who share my pain points, and that when people are feeling isolated and alone and kind of and a bit overwhelmed, which is we all do a lot of the time, to be in a room with people who share your pain is extraordinarily valuable. So all those reasons why events are very powerful right now, and I think it's great. I think the industry is so much better. The people in it are so great that bring them together, whatever group subset it is a great thing to do.
Especially like the mixture between in person, which has been fantastic, especially last year. That was kind of really made an effort to go to those last year and found great value in them, even just through building out your network and sharing experiences, learning new things. Like someone was chatting about, maybe a different marketing strategy that they're, trying for their clients. And that kind of gave me an idea, and then you kind of go back and forth, etc. So it's really beneficial that way. And I've seen a lot of online communities actually develop as well, which can bridge the gap between maybe conferences and events. That's more of a weekly connection, a daily connection, whether it's a Slack channel or another kind of platform that they've built out themselves, where you're just, whether it's go-to-market and it's everything inside there is just pure go-to-market, or everything B2B marketing, or everything content marketing. So I think it's going to be really interesting to see how brands position themselves in those areas, whether that be sponsoring the community, building the community themselves. I think that's a really interesting dynamic of marketing and how they get integrated. Any tips from your own perspective on how that can work well from a B2B company, maybe looking at investing in it, but don't know whether to sponsor an event, start an event, or start a community, sponsor a community, etc.?
Well, it's a fascinating topic right now, Jack. I would just urge a bit of separation between the words events and community, because community has a certain set of expectations around it, which are not necessarily the same as an event, which can be like a standalone, isolated activity. There is a definitely overlap between them, but I definitely urge community with a small c is what we have across B2B marketing generally, and there's different subsets of that, and that's really powerful. So tapping into that is a really great thing. I would urge companies caution if they're thinking about trying to build their own community, which is a longer term thing. It's definitely possible. It's definitely valuable. It's definitely hard work. It definitely requires a major commitment, and in a time when, and it definitely won't repay you tomorrow. So in a time when marketing budgets are fickle, I would just say just be careful about that. But in terms of events, I mean, it's a bit like the whole influencer conversation. Like if you're looking to be present where your customers are, you're looking to, and you have someone who's already done the hard work, who's brought your customers to a place. Well, that's an obvious thing to invest in. But in terms of running your own events, I did some work. I'll be kind of upfront in terms of I did some work as an influencer with Cvent recently, who are an influencer platform, but their piece of work really resonated with me, because they were talking about what event-led growth looks like, and it absolutely aligned with what B2B marketing does for Propolis, which is that it's actually not so much about big one-off, landmark events. Those things are good, but actually it's the regular and often little bits and smaller events for niche groups of people, which can be more powerful because, and they can be more tactically deployed as well. And so that's better aligned probably with an annual go-to-market strategy than an annual event, even though annual events are good too. As you were talking, what it reminded me is to go back to my other point about your customers, right? Because they're so fundamental, and we're still talking now. I remember 20 years ago saying marketers should spend time with their customers, and they just don't, right? And actually, so having things like advisory boards, right, customer forums is a great way of, you're kind of building a community. That's post sale, but that's a valuable, that has additional value to it. which you shouldn't overlook. And the power of those recommendations is really, really, really important. I just think from a cold new business perspective, it is very challenging because people have that trust threshold, which they're reluctant to let you through until they've made a purchase.
Even the post-purchase, that would be actually a great place to start off. Like you mentioned there, I think that might be even just the place to start because they're paying customers already. And sometimes it's the feedback that we don't always want to hear, but it's the one that would make like a lot of difference in terms of whether that's improving your product or improving your service to them. They're the ones that are paying. Those are the ones that you want to keep, avoid churn, keep the longevity going, keep the relationship going. So that could be a great place to start, is just get your existing customers and start asking them questions and just give them an opportunity to speak.
Agreed. Absolutely agreed. There you go. We just solved B2B marketing just in one afternoon on the first day of January as well, which is fantastic.
We can sit back anyway from here, Joel. I think 2026 will be a breeze. So we're pretty much set. It's all good. But no, it sounds simple, but sometimes it probably is the simple stuff that we probably avoid, especially myself being in the content marketing, let's say, of it. You can have all the tactics and strategies and, you're going to improve this title, you're going to improve this thumbnail, you're going to make this edit or this different camera angle, etc. And often it is just the simple, consistent stuff that makes a difference as long as you commit to it over a long period of time that actually moves the needle. And that kind of brings me on to the last part of this, Joel, is if you could kind of give one piece of advice, your 1% insight, for example, the change that B2B marketers need to make in 2026 when it comes to improving trust and influence, what would that be?
To recognizing those mechanisms that you have. I really think thought leadership is the thing which can drive so much value, and it provides a central area of your messaging. It provides a real central voice and allows you to tap in. So I would urge you to think about that. But all those other areas, advocacy is so powerful, right? If you can get your customers on board, it's not that it can deliver so much opportunities, so much benefit by having those people aligned around what you're doing and deploying them in your communications. So I'd look at that too. So I hope that helps.
Fantastic, Joel. And then the last part is a rapid fire round. So there's 3 questions here. The first one is, I've changed this. I previously asked what is the best book, but since then I've been kind of told that it actually is better to include resource because you can kind of include either a book or a podcast or a newsletter that people like to subscribe to. So here it goes. The first question, Joel, in the rapid fire round is the best resource for B2B marketing right now.
Well, I've got to say my podcast or my newsletter, haven't I? Otherwise, I'd be kidding myself. You should also so Trust and Influence in B2B, or my LinkedIn newsletter, where I deliver the same different slice, the same insights. Or you can look at my YouTube as well. So I'm active on all those channels. And on YouTube, I go to events and I do a little bit of filming at events. So that sounds very self-serving. You should also check out. There are lots of fellow influencers you should check out as well in B2B. And I'd urge you to follow B2B Marketing as well. It's with orange branding that they pump out some great content. It's my business. So, if at the risk of sounding self-serving, that's what I'd say.
One company that demonstrates strong B2B credibility or thought leadership, in your opinion, over the last kind of few years and going into 2026?
Gosh, in terms of thought leadership, a couple of the ones which link to mind immediately are Sakana are great at that, and they're actually a consumer insights company, but they sell to businesses, so they're B2B brand. They're fantastic. Capgemini have also been really, really consistent in terms of their thought leadership. So I'm really impressed by the stuff they've delivered. So I'd say there's kind of 2 there. But from terms of other brands across B2B, I'd look at a really interesting one as a marketer I always admire is a guy called Brian McCready, who works at a law firm actually called Alshaw Goddard, and he produces great marketing. I mean, he's really pushing the creative boundaries, not in thought leadership or that, but he's just someone who's always prepared to make himself feel a bit uncomfortable in terms of the things that he does. So I'd check out what Brian McCready's doing.
Cool. I'll check him out. And then the last one, if you weren't working in B2B marketing, what would you be doing?
Oh my good, I'd be bereft, Jack. I don't know what I'd be doing. I'd probably be a journalist in another. Maybe try to be a journalist in another capacity. I love architecture and the built environment, and I love the kind of property refurbishment stuff that you get on YouTube as well. I love seeing a result, seeing a transformation. So maybe something in that area, that would be fun.
Very good. Thank you very much for sharing your 1% insights today, Joel. Where can our listeners learn more about you, the podcast, etc.?
Well, you can follow me on LinkedIn, Jack. I've really enjoyed this conversation. If you look for Joel Harrison, I'm the most visible Joel Harrison on LinkedIn, or you can search for Trust and Influence in B2B, wherever you get your podcast, Apple, Spotify, or on YouTube, as I say. You can find me there where you can access the podcast and a lot of other stuff that I've done, my own speaking where it's visible, other podcasts that I've appeared on, or where I go to events and I do a bit of video so you can understand what's going on in the market. I'm trying to show people what I can see in the market, and I'm having a bit of fun playing with new technology as well.
Fantastic. We'll link those in the show notes so you can check them out below in this podcast episode. Thank you, Joel.
Thanks, Jack. It's been great talking to you.